All right, so here's a quick update on what I've been up to and how I've been building this door. So I started off with this plywood template and I cut it out to be an exact fit to the threshold that it needs to go into. But raw plywood edges are ugly, so I need to rip the plywood off the sides and replace it with some walnut. So I marked 1/8 of an inch all the way around the door, and here I'm cutting that 1/8 of an inch off. With the flat sides, I can use the track saw, real easy here. But when it comes time for the curve at the top, I'm gonna have to use a jigsaw to do that. Notice all the dust or sawdust going everywhere? I hooked up my dust collection and then I didn't turn the machine on. Pretty smart. But anyways, I used the track saw to cut both sides of the door template here. And then I move on to the top. So fish out my jigsaw, put a blade in there, give Taylor a kiss, and then start cutting. The downside to using a jigsaw for something like this, one is I'm not the most accurate in the world, but two, the cuts tend to not be square. So I get out a square here and I check for square. Anywhere that it's not, I mark with pencil, come back with a sander, a block sander, and go over it myself until it is square. Now it's time to cut the walnut out. I cut 1/8 of an inch off the door, so now I need to cut 1/8 inch strips of walnut. Here I'm testing the cut. It's going to be 3/4 of an inch wide. That just seemed a little risky to me, so I get my thin rip gauge out here. This allows you to move the thin piece to the left side of the blade. When you've got such a thin piece against the fence, between the fence and the blade, it can just be a little tricky. If you can move your offcut to the other side of the blade, it's just a lot safer. So I do that, set it up. Here I'm actually cutting this edge banding for the door a little bit thicker than it needs to be. I'd rather have it be too thick than too thin. So when I glue this on, there is going to be a lip, and I'm just going to come back with a sander and sand it down until the binding is the exact same size as the door. Now it's time to glue this on, so I use my bandy clamps, lots of glue, and I start attaching it to the sides. When it comes time for the curve at the top, it's a little bit harder to get this clamped on there and clamped on well. So more clamps come out, and then eventually I'll use a pin nailer. What's nice about this piece that's going on is that this is going to make my curve more consistent. There were some flat spots from the sanding and from the jigsawing before, so wrapping this piece around kind of reestablishes like a very nice consistent curve. Now it's time for those pin nails. This door is 8 feet tall.